You'll cause more trouble than it's worth.
Everyone stick around. We got a lot.
If you haven't learned, I got to tell you, if you haven't learned how to say the truth by the time you're 71, you are a hopeless cause.
Everyone stick around. We got a lot more to talk about. We also have some more breaking news. It now seems that Robert Mueller, the special counsel, is playing the "there's a tweet for that" game with President Trump's Twitter feed. The new report that could spell more legal trouble for the White House coming up. Plus, it's deadline day for the federal government to reunite thousands of children, migrant children who had been separated from their parents at the border. But what happens to those children who cannot be returned to their parents? Will they ever see their moms and dads again? Stay with us. Welcome back from the investigation into Trump in New York to the investigation into Trump in Washington, D.C. More breaking news now. The New York Times reporting that as part of his investigation into whether President Trump attempted to obstruct justice in the Russia probe, special counsel Robert Mueller is analyzing President Trump's disparaging tweets and statements about his own Attorney General Jeff Sessions and, of course, fired FBI Director James Comey. The focus, whether, quote, the actions add up to attempts to obstruct the investigation by both intimidating witnesses and pressuring senior law enforcement officials to tamp down the inquiry, the Times reports. Mr. Trump has repeatedly expressed his frustration with Sessions' decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. In July of last year, the president tweeted Sessions was, quote, very weak, and told the Wall Street Journal that same day, quote, I'm very disappointed in Jeff Sessions. This past April, the president again lamented his choice.
The Attorney General made a terrible mistake when he did this and when he recused himself, or he should have certainly let us know if he was going to recuse himself, and we would have put a different Attorney General in.
The president also took aim at former FBI Director James Comey, asking the then FBI Director in March 2017 to publicly state that he was not under investigation, which Comey refused to do, according to Comey. Weeks later, the president fired Comey, claiming he had been disappointed by his actions in the Hillary Clinton email investigation. The president later admitted to NBC News that when he made the decision to dismiss Comey, he was thinking about the Russia probe. In a statement to the Times, President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, responded, quote, if you're going to obstruct justice, you do it quietly and secretly, not in public, unquote. Let's discuss this. Ann, do any of these single actions constitute obstruction, or is it more about establishing a larger pattern of behavior? And do you think a tweet could really be part of that?
So I think there's two things. I mean, one of the key lines, I think, in the article that you just referred to is that whether all the action adds up to obstruction of justice. And here I think we're really talking about things like witness tampering. Was Trump trying to influence people not to testify or to cooperate with the investigation? And so I don't think we're looking at one single action. I think we're looking at all the actions we've discussed before, things like, Trump's efforts to influence Comey, efforts to influence Sessions behind closed doors, as well as now we're talking about public efforts, both to try to potentially influence them and maybe to discredit them. What's fascinating to me about the tweet question is, look, we live in a brave new world where when we looked at obstruction under Nixon or under Clinton, people weren't tweeting. And so to me, I think the president, we know he personally tweets, and it's fair game for Mueller to ask these questions. But it also reinforces to me why it's so important for Mueller to actually sit down with the president and to get the answers to what he was doing and what he was thinking as he was doing this entire course of conduct.
Joseph, let me ask you, President Trump's lawyers have long stated that President Trump is consistently under attack, and these tweets and statements are him just simply defending himself. Do you agree?
I mean, look, the reality is that every president comes under attack. That's just the nature of the beast. It comes with the job. Having said that, I think this is what many people, even people who are fully supportive of the MAGA agenda, talk about when they say the president has placed himself in unnecessary political peril. Words matter when you're the president of the United States, even when they come 280 characters at a time. And I think that the hard truth is that, unfortunately, we end up having discussions and having to deal with unnecessary evils when the president, unfortunately, can't just put down the Twitter fingers and actually have a conversation about the agenda.
Anna?
You know, roosters are coming home to roost. Look, I keep thinking if I had $1 for every time I've heard a legal expert on TV talk about the legal peril that Donald Trump is placing himself on and that he should not be tweeting, that it is going to come back to hurt him, I could probably have enough money to buy myself a really nice pair of Manolo Blahnik shoes right now, and they ain't cheap. You know, he's been doing this for such a long time now. We have seen him treat Jeff Sessions like a human punching bag over and over again and express his frustration. And I think what this entire you know, all of this thing that's happening this week, the Cohen tapes, the tweets, the Money Man, it shows us just how wide the scope of this Mueller investigation is. And we saw it coming when, you know, we saw that he was hiring folks that were experts in flipping witnesses. We saw him hire folks that were experts on public corruption. We saw him hire experts on financial crimes. It's all now beginning to make sense, and the puzzle is getting filled up.
Bakari, Rudy Giuliani has a point in one sense that I think most lay people, not necessarily prosecutors or attorneys, but lay people think of obstruction of justice as something that is done secretly and not very, very public tweets.
I guess. I mean, Rudy Giuliani having a point is where you kind of threw me off. The first thing is I can't be an expert on Donald Trump's tweets because he blocked me about 2 years ago. And so I'm blessed and fortunate enough not to have to read them every single day. But what I can tell you is that this case of obstruction of justice is compiling everything from tweets to his own words, to his interviews with Lester Holt, to his actions of firing Comey, to his words when he talks about wanting to get rid of the Attorney General Jeff Sessions. And so it's going to be compiled with all of this. You know, I do think that most lay people believe that in order to obstruct justice, you have to kidnap a witness. But that's not the case here. You can be very public in this obstruction. I think that there is a case of obstruction of justice against Donald Trump. The larger question that no one's really wrangled with is whether or not you can actually indict a sitting president, which is a whole nother can of worms, which I'm not sure has been answered yet, which is why I believe Mueller won't do that. We're going down this path to show, I think Mueller's going down this path to show people that Donald Trump has trampled on the law many times on Twitter, in words, in firing, in actions. And I think that's what we'll see whenever he issues this report. I remind people that it's going to be a report. It's highly unlikely that it's going to be an indictment.
Bakari, very quickly, if you could, why did President Trump block you on Twitter?
I think he had a problem with how handsome I am, Jake. That's the only thing.
What had you said? You must have said something to merit a block.
It was during the South Carolina primary, and I'm sure that I was talking about his lack of or his allergy to the truth, and I have no idea. I woke up and he blocked me, and then he later criticized me. So there we have it.
All right, I'm going to see what I can do to remedy that for you. Everyone stick around.
I'm having Twitter blocking envy.
Everyone stick around. We got more to talk about.
What do I have to do?
President Trump's chief of staff is about to reach a major milestone in this White House, but does former Marine General John Kelly have the same influence that he used to have? Stay with us.
In terms of homeland security is
Anna Navarro on that, because I just, you know, as a journalist, I'm stunned that actually would take place. You don't like the questions, therefore you ban the pool reporter for the day from an event.
You know, and I think there was a silver lining to the entire experience yesterday, what happened yesterday, and it's that we saw journalists from across the political spectrum banding together and standing up for each other. I read a tweet from Brett Baer from Fox News, remembering when you had done the same thing under Obama. Accountability. They can't handle transparency. They can't answer the tough questions. And so this idea of attacking the press, of calling the press the enemy of the people, on the week that journalists got shot and killed at the Gazette, which is something that Donald Trump did, is really a threat to a bastion of American democracy, and something that should outrage every single American, regardless of partisanship, regardless of Trump, regardless of anything. You have to understand that freedom of the press is something that makes America great today. And Donald Trump is not the man that's going to change that. Good luck with that, buddy.
One question I have, though, Joseph, is whether or not Bill Shine did that to please the president. Someone I know who used to work with Bill Shine at Fox News described him to me as the ultimate yes man. And I wonder if that's what President Trump needs. If he needs a yes man, I don't know if that's an apt description or not, but that's what this Fox person said. If President Trump needs a yes man versus needing somebody who will be the one to tell him you can't do that, you shouldn't do that.
Well, look, I think that the reality is I don't think he needs a yes man, but I think that that is something that he might gravitate towards. I think the reality is that being chief of staff to President Trump is probably a miserable job. I mean, it's almost akin to being, trying to save a failing bar, by rationing the napkins. Meanwhile, you got a bartender giving away champagne for free. I mean, that's what you're really dealing with. The fact is that President Trump, whether you like it, whether you hate it, has gotten to where he is by being exactly who he is. And any time that your job description is to try to make him less of who he is, the length of time you're going to be in that position is very short, and those days are numbered. So I think the reality is, whether you're talking about John Kelly, whether you're talking about Reince Priebus, anytime you are trying to be an individual who is trying to curtail the president, to actually get him to act in a manner that is not consistent with what he actually wants to do, good luck.
Bakari, I just want to contemplate for a second, if we could, that President Trump's White House took issue with a reporter being rude. President Trump's White House.
Yeah, and that's irony in its fullest. I mean, I think that, I know that Donald Trump, he's lowered the discourse in this country, the political discourse in this country. He's lowered the bar for what it means to be president in this country. He's sullied the Oval Office with his discourse. But even more importantly, I think that if we just go back to the mechanics of how a White House works, I want to talk about Bill Shine for a moment, because how does he vet? How does someone who leaves Fox News in disgrace, whose wife has a history of racially insensitive, if not racist tweets, how does he become the communications director for the most powerful person in the world? It shows you that the White House is, one, dysfunctional. It shows you, two, they really don't care about procedures and protocols, and they don't care about the people that they put in power. Bill Shine is now representative, and he's the voice that people hear that's reflective of America, and he's supposed to be the voice that's reflective of me, but I just can't believe that Bill Shine is actually in the White House. That's upsetting.
All right, everyone stick around. Big question now, of course. Will they ever see their moms and dads again? What will happen to the hundreds of children that the federal government says cannot be reunited with their parents? Stay with us. I referred to earlier, explaining what happens to a lot of these kids when they're separated from their parents. Take a listen.
If they have a relative in the U.S., there's a chance that that relative will be appointed their legal guardian. But many of the other kids are going to actually go in the foster care system and could become wards of the state, could be subject to adoption. There's a very high likelihood a lot of these parents, are never going to see their kids again, and a lot of these kids are actually going to stay in the U.S.
Anna, your reaction?
Heartbreak, extreme sadness, frustration, anger. Look, this has been a disaster of the Trump administration's making. Let us not forget that this situation was caused by a unilateral policy decision by this administration. Then, after the public outrage, he had a dog and pony show where he signed an executive order that he had absolutely no idea, no intention of actually implementing. This is a bureaucratic debacle. It is a legal debacle. It is a humanitarian crisis. And it is, frankly, completely against American values. I am very glad that despite everything that has happened in the last 10 days, the Helsinki horror, the tweets, the Mueller investigation, the Cohen tapes, the only way that this humanitarian crisis will ever be addressed and ever be solved is if it continues getting coverage, if we continue seeing the faces and the stories and hearing the voices and hearing the pleas. So we have got to stay on this story, because the Trump administration is counting on us being like he is and having no attention span to keep and to focus on one story. We must continue focusing on this until these children are reunited with their families.
Yeah, a reminder that the legislative branch of the government, Congress, is supposed to be providing oversight over the executive branch. I'm not sure if they remembered that. And let me bring you
they haven't read that memo.
Yeah, and let me bring you into this. Is there any real way that the judiciary, the court, the judges can force the Trump administration to reunite these children with their parents?
I mean, I think one of the things that is so stunning to me about this is that you have a federal court judge saying you have to get this done, and it is not being done. And that is just shocking. I mean, this is not the way our justice system works in our country. And so the judge could hold the administration in contempt. I personally would favor that at this point. I mean, you know, you can't have 900 families that are not being reunited, where the government is just not able to find people, or deporting parents without their children. And, you know, this is just not the way that these processes should work. And so I would be very strongly in favor of a federal judge, completely within their authority, saying the government can't do this. You're in contempt if you don't fix it. And by the way, you can't keep separating families under any circumstances, because you've completely shown an inability to do any of the things that the executive order has really promised in terms of reunification on the timetable that, you know, that was set. And so, you know, to me, it's hard to know as a lawyer what to do, but I really do believe that the courts have to take a strong and active stance here. The Congress is missing from action on this, and quite frankly, the administration has done an executive order. So the way to control this and get is through the courts.
Joseph, I want you to take a listen to California Democrat Senator Kamala Harris. She had a strong charge to protesters who rallied in support of these families that have been separated. Take a listen.
The United States government is committing an act that is absolutely one of the most inhumane acts, which is to take babies from their parents. Right. And it is important that we all stand up and say, we as a country are better than this. Yeah.
And that got applause from the crowd. What do you think, Joseph, in terms of the politics of this? Obviously, I'm sure we all agree on the humanity of it, that all the parents and should be reunited with their children. The politics of this, how do you see the Democrats and their response?
I mean, look, the first thing that pops into my mind is that old, you know, Twilight Zone episode where they say, you know, no man is obsolete. You know, well, the reality is that in the world, no human is illegal, and certainly no child is illegal. You know, there is no part of what makes this nation great to say that you're going to enhance American greatness, you know, by taking children away from their parents. And so I think that irrespective of anyone's political sensibilities, the notion that this is going to be a winning issue at the polls, to me, is ludicrous. The fact of the matter remains is that at the end of the day, this failure lies on us as a nation, and ultimately, I think, unfortunately, the Republican Party is going to be held responsible, because those children, irrespective of the decision that their parents may have made to violate the laws of this nation. Nowhere, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. says that all we ask is to be true to what you say on paper. Well, nowhere on paper in this nation does it say that children should be deprived of their parents, that children should become wards of the state. Wards of the state, by the way, where the life outcomes are precipitously worse than the average children that we have living in America every day with their own families. So I think that it's a terrible decision. And ultimately, I think that we are going to have some tremendous political backlash.
What do you think, Bakari? Do you think this is an issue that Democrats can use? I don't just mean in blue states, but how do you think this will resonate in South Carolina? How do you think this will resonate in North Carolina, places where Republicans traditionally run strong?
Well, I think it is going to resonate. I think it's going to resonate in the Georgia's governor's race, for example, when you have a Kemp versus a Stacey Abrams, somebody who's a hardliner who will not stand up against this separation of children from their parents versus Stacey Abrams. You're going to see it in the Tennessee Senate race. You're going to see it down in Mississippi with Mike Espy running for United States Senate. So you'll see it in some of these red places. But this is an issue of morality, and Democrats have seized the high ground with this. And this is now the face of immigration. The face of immigration is now young kids being ripped away from their parents. And, you know, Trump's going to beat MS-13 into the ground, and he's going to say Nancy Pelosi is in a love fest with MS-13 and gaslight America. But that's not the case. It's about humanity and basic humanity and the utter incompetence of Secretary Nelson. She needs to be fired or resign. She's a disgrace.
All right, everyone stick around. It's a war that he started himself, that the American business community says.
Now, President Putin denied having anything to do with the election interference in 2016. Every U.S. intelligence agency has concluded that Russia did. My first question for you, sir, is who do you believe? My second question is, would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
So let me just say that we have two thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Why haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know, where is the server, and what is the server saying? With that being said, all I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. But I really do want to see the server, but I have confidence in both parties. I really believe that this will probably go on for a while, but I don't think it can go on without finding out what happened to the server, what happened to the servers of the Pakistani gentlemen that worked on the DNC. Where are those servers? They're missing. Where are they? What happened to Hillary Clinton's emails? 33,000 emails, gone, just gone. I think in Russia they wouldn't be gone so easily. I think it's a disgrace that we can't get Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails. So I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. And what he did is an incredible offer. He offered to have the people working on the case come and work with their investigators with respect to the 12 people. I think that's an incredible offer.
Trump. Here's a guy who was called Haiti and African nations S-hole countries. Here's a guy who in 1973, as you've already indicated, was found in a judgment by the Department of Justice to be a discriminatory person when it came to black people. The Central Park Five, he called for their death, and even after they were exonerated, he still said it was outrageous. The reality is that we're talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson. He looks at stars. He looks through telescopes. Is he an astrophysicist? Well, the reality is this. Donald Trump talks like a racist, thinks like a racist, makes statements like a racist, conjures emotions that give succor and support to white supremacists and white nationalists. Yeah, he's a racist because racism is as racism does. So this attempt to avoid it, and here's the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, it's not the white supremacists who are the problem, it's white moderates and conservatives who tend to be complicit with that by trying to dismiss it. That's part of the problem we're confronting here in America. And until white folk like you can stand up and find your spine, you will continue to be complicit in the racist animus of this country.